Rock Hudson stood 6 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulders that could carry the weight of American dreams and a smile that sold millions of movie tickets. He was the ultimate symbol of masculinity, the perfect leading man who made women swoon and men want to be him. But behind the carefully crafted image lay Hollywood's most dangerous secret, one that would ultimately destroy him. Before his death from AIDS in 1985, Hudson left behind a collection of private letters and recordings that revealed the true cost of living as America's most beloved lie. The names in those documents read like a Hollywood Hall of Fame: young actors, established stars, and industry power brokers who shared his hidden world while publicly maintaining the facade of heterosexual perfection. Was Hudson's death really just another casualty of the AIDS epidemic, or was he silenced before he could expose the industry's most protected secrets? Tonight, we uncover the tragic story of a man who became America's ideal while slowly dying inside, and the powerful forces that kept him trapped in a golden cage until his final breath. Subscribe now to discover the truth behind Hollywood's greatest deception. James Dean, the rebel who saw through the mask. James Dean didn't just rebel against society, he rebelled against the suffocating expectations that crushed men like Rock Hudson. When they met in 1954, Hudson was already Warner Brothers' rising star, carefully managed by the ruthless agent Henry Willson, while Dean was the dangerous newcomer who refused to play by Hollywood's rules. Their first encounter occurred at George Cukor's infamous parties, where closeted stars gathered behind closed doors to drop their masks for a few precious hours. Dean saw through Hudson's polished exterior immediately, reportedly telling him, "You're the loneliest man I've ever met, and you don't even know it yet." Hudson, already trapped by his contract and public image, was both fascinated and terrified by Dean's authenticity. While Hudson practiced his heterosexual performance daily, walking with leading ladies, attending premieres with starlets, Dean lived openly among his circle of friends, refusing to apologize for his desires. Their relationship was brief but intense. Dean's friend William Bast later revealed that Dean spoke of Hudson with a mixture of attraction and pity, saying, "He's beautiful, but he's already dead inside. They've turned him into a product, not a person." When Dean died in his car crash, Hudson attended the funeral in dark sunglasses, standing far from the cameras. Those close to him noticed he never spoke Dean's name again, as if the rebel's memory was too painful a reminder of the authentic life he could never allow himself to live. Henry Willson, the agent who built and owned him. Henry Willson wasn't just Rock Hudson's agent. He was his creator, his controller, and ultimately his destroyer. Willson specialized in manufacturing male stars, taking ordinary young men and transforming them into Hollywood gods through a combination of acting lessons, physical training, and carefully orchestrated relationships with women. Roy Scherer Jr., a truck driver from Illinois, became Rock Hudson through Willson's meticulous engineering. Willson changed his name, taught him to walk differently, speak with authority, and most importantly, never reveal his true self to anyone who might expose him. But Willson's protection came with a price that extended far beyond money. According to industry insiders, Willson maintained detailed files on all his clients' private lives, using their secrets as insurance against any attempts at independence. Hudson's file was reportedly the thickest, containing photographs, letters, and recorded conversations that could have destroyed not just his career, but his entire existence. The relationship between Willson and Hudson was complex and toxic. Willson provided Hudson with carefully selected companions for public events, while simultaneously arranging private encounters with men through a network of discreet contacts. Hudson lived in constant fear that Willson might one day decide he was no longer valuable enough to protect. When AIDS began devastating Hudson's body, Willson was already dead. But his legacy of control continued through other industry figures who had inherited his methods and his secrets. Hudson remained trapped by systems Willson had created, unable to live authentically even as he faced death. George Nader. The love that endured in shadows. George Nader was different from Rock Hudson's other relationships. He wasn't a brief encounter or a dangerous liaison. He was the man Hudson truly loved, the relationship that lasted decades, despite the impossible circumstances that surrounded them both. Nader, a handsome actor who never achieved Hudson's level of fame, understood the rules of their hidden world. They met in the early 1950s when both were struggling actors, before Hudson's rise to superstardom created additional layers of secrecy and danger around their relationship. Their love story played out in stolen moments, weekend trips to Palm Springs under assumed names, quiet dinners at Nader's house when Hudson could slip away from his handlers, and late-night phone calls using code words to avoid detection by anyone who might be listening. While Hudson performed heterosexuality for the cameras, attending premieres with actresses like Phyllis Gates, whom he eventually married in a studio-arranged ceremony, Nader remained his emotional anchor. Friends described Nader as the only person who could calm Hudson during his frequent panic attacks about exposure. The relationship required incredible sacrifice from both men. Nader's own career opportunities were limited by his association with Hudson, and Hudson lived in constant fear that their connection would be discovered. They developed an elaborate system of communication, meeting at predetermined locations and using mutual friends as intermediaries. When Hudson was diagnosed with AIDS, Nader became his primary caretaker, a role he maintained until Hudson's death, while carefully staying out of public view to protect both their reputations. Tab Hunter. The Golden Boy's dangerous game. Tab Hunter represented everything Rock Hudson was supposed to be: young, blonde, all-American, and seemingly straight. But beneath Hunter's teenage heartthrob image lay the same carefully constructed deception that defined Hudson's life, making their relationship both inevitable and incredibly dangerous. They met through the interconnected network of closeted Hollywood actors who found each other despite the industry's attempts to keep them isolated. Hunter, like Hudson, was managed by agents who understood that his career depended entirely on maintaining his heterosexual image for his teenage female fan base. Their affair was conducted with military precision, involving coded messages, prearranged meeting locations, and elaborate alibis. Both men were constantly followed by photographers and gossip columnists looking for any hint of scandal, making every encounter a carefully calculated risk. The relationship was complicated by their similar positions in the Hollywood hierarchy. Both were valuable studio properties who couldn't afford exposure, but both were also lonely men seeking authentic connection in a world that demanded constant performance. Hunter later revealed in his autobiography that their relationship existed in a constant state of paranoia. Every phone call might be monitored, every meeting could be photographed, and every expression of affection had to be weighed against the potential consequences of discovery. When rumors about Hunter's arrest at a gay party in Long Beach surfaced, both men were forced to increase their public heterosexual performances. Hudson's handlers arranged more high-profile dates with actresses, while Hunter was pushed into a fake romance with Natalie Wood that satisfied the press but left both actors emotionally exhausted. Anthony Perkins. The Psycho Star's Secret Network. Anthony Perkins brought a different dynamic to Rock Hudson's hidden world. He was an established actor with his own secrets who understood the psychological toll of living a double life. Their relationship developed through the underground network of closeted Hollywood actors who provided mutual support and companionship. Perkins, famous for his portrayal of Norman Bates in Psycho, carried his own burden of carefully managed public image. Studio executives worried that his intense, sometimes unsettling screen presence might raise questions about his masculinity, making his private life a constant source of anxiety. Hudson found in Perkins a kindred spirit who understood the exhausting nature of constant performance. Both men had developed elaborate personas to protect their careers, but both were slowly being consumed by the stress of maintaining those facades. Their encounters were reportedly more emotional than physical, consisting of long conversations about the cost of fame and the possibility of ever living authentically. Perkins later described feeling like he was drowning in plain sight during his Hollywood years, a sentiment Hudson deeply understood. The relationship was complicated by Perkins' own struggles with his sexuality and his eventual marriage to photographer Barry Berenson. Like many closeted actors of his generation, Perkins hoped marriage might provide cover for his real desires while also offering the emotional stability he craved. When Hudson's AIDS diagnosis became public, Perkins was among the few Hollywood figures who privately reached out to offer support, though he couldn't do so publicly without raising questions about their relationship. Montgomery Clift, the broken angel connection. Montgomery Clift entered Rock Hudson's orbit during one of the most vulnerable periods of both their lives. Clift, ravaged by alcohol and prescription drugs following his devastating car accident, represented both a cautionary tale and a mirror for Hudson's own hidden struggles. Their connection was facilitated by Elizabeth Taylor, who was close to both men and understood their shared burden of living closeted lives in Hollywood's spotlight. Taylor often hosted private gatherings where both actors could drop their public personas and speak honestly about their experiences. Clift's tragedy resonated deeply with Hudson because it represented what could happen when the pressure of maintaining a false identity became unbearable. Clift had been unable to sustain his career while battling his inner demons, and Hudson saw his own potential future in Clift's decline. Their relationship was brief and marked by a shared understanding of the impossible choices they faced daily. Both men had achieved significant success while sacrificing their authentic selves, and both were beginning to question whether the trade had been worth it. Hudson later told George Nader that spending time with Clift was like looking into a broken mirror. He could see what his life might become if he lost control of his carefully constructed image. The encounter strengthened Hudson's resolve to maintain his facade, even as it reminded him of the cost of doing so. Clift's early death served as a warning to Hudson about the dangers of self-medication and despair, lessons that would prove tragically relevant as Hudson faced his own health crisis years later. Marc Christian, The Final Love and Bitter Betrayal. Marc Christian. McGinnis entered Rock Hudson's life during his final years, becoming both his last great love and the man who would ultimately expose his secrets to the world. Christian was young, ambitious, and seemingly unaware of the complex web of deception that surrounded Hudson's public life. Their relationship began in 1982, when Hudson was already in his 50s and increasingly tired of the elaborate performances required to maintain his image. Christian represented a chance at authentic connection, but Hudson's inability to be completely honest about his health would ultimately destroy both their relationship and his carefully protected privacy. Christian later claimed that Hudson never disclosed his AIDS diagnosis, continuing their physical relationship while knowing he was potentially exposing Christian to the virus. This allegation would become the center of a highly publicized lawsuit that revealed intimate details about Hudson's private life. The relationship was complicated by the generational and cultural differences between the two men. Christian had grown up in a more open era and initially didn't fully understand the level of secrecy that had defined Hudson's entire adult life. When Hudson's health began deteriorating, Christian became increasingly suspicious about the medications and doctor visits that Hudson tried to hide. The discovery of Hudson's diagnosis marked the beginning of the end, not just for their relationship, but for Hudson's ability to control his public image. Christian's later lawsuit against Hudson's estate revealed the extent to which Hudson had compartmentalized his life, maintaining separate relationships and identities that never fully intersected. The legal battle became a public dissection of Hudson's private world, exposing the very secrets he had spent his entire career protecting. Phyllis Gates, the beard who knew too much. Phyllis Gates represented Rock Hudson's most public attempt at heterosexual performance. A marriage that was supposed to silence the growing whispers about his sexuality while providing him with the respectability that Hollywood demanded. But Gates was more than just a willing participant in a business arrangement. She was a woman whose life was fundamentally altered by her role in Hudson's deception. The marriage was orchestrated by Henry Willson and the studio system as a response to increasing rumors about Hudson's private life. Confidential magazine was beginning to investigate Hollywood's closeted stars, and Hudson needed a convincing cover story to protect his career. Gates, Willson's secretary, understood the arrangement from the beginning, but she also harbored genuine feelings for Hudson that complicated their professional relationship. She later revealed that she hoped the marriage might evolve into something real, despite knowing the fundamental impossibility of that dream. The 3-year marriage was a carefully choreographed performance that fooled the public but took a devastating toll on both participants. Gates found herself isolated and lonely, married to a man who could never love her the way she needed, while Hudson struggled with the guilt of using her to maintain his lie. When the marriage ended in 1958, Gates was bound by legal agreements that prevented her from revealing the truth about their relationship. She carried Hudson's secrets for decades, watching as he became increasingly famous, while she remained largely forgotten by the industry that had used her as a prop. After Hudson's death, Gates finally spoke publicly about their relationship, revealing the emotional cost of being married to a closeted movie star and the complex feelings she maintained for a man who had both protected and betrayed her. Tom Clark, the final confidant and keeper of secrets. Tom Clark was Rock Hudson's publicist and one of the few people who knew the complete truth about his client's life. Unlike the lovers who came and went, or the industry figures who used Hudson for their own purposes, Clark remained a constant presence throughout Hudson's career, managing his image while protecting his secrets. Clark's role required incredible skill and discretion. He had to create believable cover stories for Hudson's activities, arrange alibis for suspicious situations, and maintain relationships with journalists who could either help or destroy his client's career with a single story. The relationship between Clark and Hudson was built on mutual dependence and genuine affection. Clark understood that his job wasn't just about publicity. It was about protecting a man whose entire existence depended on maintaining an elaborate fiction about his identity. When Hudson was diagnosed with AIDS, Clark faced the most difficult challenge of his career. He had to help Hudson seek medical treatment while preventing any information about his condition from reaching the press, all while watching his friend and client slowly deteriorate. Clark's loyalty was tested when Hudson's condition became too obvious to hide. He had to make impossible choices between protecting Hudson's privacy and acknowledging the reality of his situation, knowing that either decision would have devastating consequences. After Hudson's death, Clark continued to protect his client's reputation while gradually revealing selected details about their relationship. His careful management of Hudson's posthumous image helped ensure that the actor would be remembered as a movie star rather than just a victim of AIDS. Rock Hudson's story reveals the devastating cost of being chosen to embody an impossible ideal. As Hollywood's symbol of American masculinity, he was trapped in a golden cage that grew smaller with each passing year, each successful film, and each moment of public adoration for a man who didn't really exist. His secret relationships with James Dean, George Nader, Tab Hunter, and others represent more than hidden affairs. They were desperate attempts to find authentic connection while living a life built entirely on deception. Each love story followed the same tragic pattern. Moments of genuine intimacy crushed by the weight of impossible circumstances and the constant threat of exposure. The industry that created and profited from Hudson's image ultimately consumed him. From Henry Willson's manipulative control to the studio system's demand for heterosexual performance to the press's relentless scrutiny, every aspect of Hollywood's machinery worked to prevent Hudson from living as his authentic self. His death from AIDS became a watershed moment that forced America to confront both the epidemic and the reality of closeted celebrities. But even in death, Hudson's story was sanitized and controlled, his complex humanity reduced to cautionary tale and symbol rather than being honored as the tragic love story it truly was. The men who loved him were forced back into shadows, their grief unacknowledged, and their relationships erased from official narratives. The industry that had used Hudson's fabricated masculinity to sell millions of tickets moved on to create new stars and new lies, having learned nothing from the human cost of their beautiful deceptions. Hudson's legacy reminds us that behind every perfect image lies a real person with real desires, real pain, and real love that deserve to be honored rather than hidden. His story continues to resonate because the choice between authenticity and acceptance remains tragically relevant for countless people who still fear the cost of being seen as they truly are. If Rock Hudson's tragic story moved you, please share it to honor his memory and the memory of all who paid the ultimate price for love in an unforgiving world. Subscribe for more untold stories of Hollywood's hidden history.